Well, BP is the latest oil major to report near record profits with its second highest quarterly earnings ever. It also announced an additional $2.5 billion share buyback. Of course, it's just the latest, and President Biden yesterday escalated weeks of sharp warnings to energy producers, floating a so-called windfall tax on their corporate profits, accusing the companies of war profiteering. Joining us now with more is Yahoo Finance's Rick Newman, who has been tracking the sort of rhetoric between the White House and the oil companies for some time. This is not a new idea. Europe's been doing it, and Democrats have floated it before. Of course, we're a week before midterms. Is there any chance that this will actually happen?
No.
That's what I thought.
Next question. End of story.
Right, but I mean, so is it just? I mean, is it just an attempt to get people to the ballot box? What's going on?
I mean,
here?
it feels pretty desperate, doesn't it? So just so everybody understands, President Biden cannot unilaterally impose any kind of tax through an executive order or any other way. Congress has to do that. Congress is not in session right now. Hello. And they actually talked about this earlier in the year when gas prices were a lot higher than they are today. And when Democrats were fully operating in Congress with full control of both houses, they didn't come close to passing a windfall tax on oil companies, even though there was some chatter about it. And honestly, it's a terrible idea. I mean, there are enough distortions in the energy market right now. When you tax companies, or raise their costs in any way, they're going to try to pass that on to consumers. So you might have the opposite effect. There's nothing in this idea of a windfall tax that says we're going to take the tax from oil companies and then rebate it back to consumers, which is what some of the countries in Europe are doing. So there's nothing there. It's just to punish. It's just to punish oil companies because they happen to be making a lot of profits when their commodity that they produce and sell, the cost of that happens to be very high. So this is a bad idea. It's not going anywhere, and I don't think it's going to have much of an impact on the elections either.
Rick, to say this is war profiting, is that too strong a language?
Yes.
They're out there drilling. The prices are higher because of what's happening over in Europe, but that's not their fault.
I mean, this is Biden vilifying the oil and gas industry, which he has done since he was running for president in 2020. I don't see what purpose it serves. War profiteering is when you take advantage of a war to crank up your prices, the prices paid by desperate combatants in a war. None of the oil companies are doing that. This is based on the oil price, the global price for oil. And by the way, the global price for oil is not that high right now. It's around, what is it, $88 for WTI, and it might be $90-92 for Brent. That's a middling price. And gas prices are at $3.75. So this is a pretty desperate effort for Biden to pass the blame for inflation onto oil companies instead of and get it off the backs of Democrats, which I don't think is going to work.
Even that passing of the blame, does that have any impact on sentiment going into the midterm elections?
Look, we know from a lot of polling that inflation is the biggest problem for consumers right now, but it's not really gasoline inflation anymore. So one thing I've been looking at is the cost of diesel fuel. Diesel fuel is up by way more than gasoline, and the spread between the cost of diesel and the cost of gasoline is close to record highs. And that matters because diesel is much more of an input in food prices, food costs and food prices than gasoline is, because you need diesel to operate the machines that work in the fields, and you need diesel to transport food. So food inflation right now is 13%. That is way more than just regular inflation, which is 8.2%. And grocery inflation is a big deal. I mean, we all see this at the grocery store. I see it. I mean, you look at simple products like bread or milk, and you're like, when did that go up by a buck? If you have kids at home and you're trying to feed a family of five, that's a lot of extra money you're paying. And Biden talking about a windfall tax on oil companies related to gasoline is not going to change anything about the pain those families are feeling.
Just one quick note, though. The oil companies are not doing themselves any favors either. The ExxonMobil CEO, we talked about the other day when they reported earnings, came out and said, we are giving money back to the American people in the form of dividends.
Yeah.
You got to own the stock to get the dividends. Well, it's not like they're just giving it to everybody.
They're giving money back to the stock-holding American people, which unfortunately is not all American people. And honestly, look, the oil and gas industry has been through this a million times. They are used to being vilified. They've had much worse problems than that recently, which is in addition to all the vilification, they lost tons of money in 2020. I mean, nobody remembers that ExxonMobil lost $24 billion in 2020 because the price of oil and gas cratered, and oil prices actually went negative for a short time because of the COVID pandemic and collapsing demand. So what almost all fossil fuel producers did then is they cut capacity. They took out their least productive capacity, and they made a vow to themselves and to their investors and to their lenders, we're never going to lose money like that again. So instead of overproducing the next time prices go up, we're going to try to retain some discipline and keep supply actually tight. All that said, by the way, it's worth pointing out, we're probably going to hit record levels of oil production here in the United States next year. We have seen gradual increases in production this year, a very rational response to higher prices. And the forecasts are for a new record in U.S. oil production next year. It's not going to be off the charts. It's going to be a little bit higher than it was in 2018, which was the peak production year. So not sure gas prices are going to be that much of a problem. Other types of inflation, harder nut to crack.